Welcome to the Sister South study on August 24th, y'all. Glad to have you here. I'm checking the video to see if it's going to come out of private mode. Yep. Okay. Ladies, feel free to go ahead and chat while I get the Facebook post up saying that we're live, okay? I don't want to be a conversation squelcher, so seriously, just go ahead. Feel free.
Of course, I forgot to unmute, so I was talking to myself. I was asking Monica, how long?
I didn't know you did that, Joyce. I thought it was only me.
All the time. Monica, how long you been going to Arthur's church congregation? And I said ecclesia.
I've been in Charlotte for 2 years. So I'm going to say it's been about a year, but I've been watching him since before I moved to Charlotte. So I've been attached to him, if you will, since maybe about 4 years now. It was definitely pre-pandemic.
Oh, cool.
So
where
yeah,
were you
about 4 or 5
before
years.
Charlotte?
So before Charlotte, I was living in Raleigh, and I was attending a house church on Shabbat. And I left there because I want, you know how you just want more than sometimes what the house, they
Sure.
call it a church, the house congregation, because it was Sabbath keeping. And then I moved to Charlotte and I started attending a Messianic Jewish congregation. And it's funny because Arthur Bailey's church is House of Israel, and I was attending a Messianic Jewish congregation called Hope of Israel. And I said, Father, I think I didn't hear you correctly. I confused the hope in the house. And it's weird because I always said when I was living in Raleigh, so Raleigh is about 3 hours away from here. And I always said, if I ever move to Charlotte, I will absolutely attend that congregation. And I moved to Charlotte and I go to Hope of Israel.
Oh, that's funny.
That is funny. So,
and you're probably sitting there going, wait, this isn't what I remember.
This is totally not what I was looking for. So the teaching was good. He was definitely Yeshua centered. I will say that. But it just really wasn't in total what I was looking for.
Right. That's nice. So nice to have that close to you too.
Yes, it's only Apostle Bailey's congregation is only about 15 minutes from me, which is perfect. So
is there a lot of people attending?
I'm noticing that more and more are coming in. It used to be maybe 20, and now more people are bringing like their families and stuff. So it's really growing to the point where he has opened up a children's room. Hopefully, prayerfully, we can get someone to, bring the children in another room where they could have their own teaching, because they get. I don't know if you've ever watched Apostle Bailey's teaching, but like I'll just put it this way: I left my house at 10:30 this morning, and I'm just getting home 4 o'clock, and that was because I left because I wanted to be on this in time. And it's good because you don't realize the time is passing. So he teaches for about 2 hours, but then he allows the live Q&A. So that went on for a couple of hours, and then I fellowshipped a bit, grabbed a bite to eat, and I said, "Oh, I gotta go. I need to be back to my apartment by 4:30."
Wow, that's really nice.
It is. I appreciate the fellowship. The people are very, very nice, and it's just, you kind of look for a group that is like Jules just said, there's a pure spirit there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wish we had that here, but I have not found that. And that's what I miss too, like just sitting with people and, going over it after the service is over and fellowshipping and eating and all that. I just have never had that in all the years of doing this, except Friday night when I first started learning about the feast days. That was it. But that group broke up, so quite a while ago. seems like. I've been a lone soldier trying to find a group until you girls.
Well, that's a challenge. I remember when I was first called to the Torah walk, coming out of the Christian church, it was a bit overwhelming for me, not knowing where to begin, um, not really understanding what I felt Yah was telling me. At the time I was only calling him God.
Sure.
Just not understanding it as a whole. So just trying to read the word and getting understanding, and then, slowly letting others know, okay, this is what I'm sensing. And other than being told that I have now fallen from grace and I'm going to hell, there was some who heard my cry, if you will. And
Sure.
unfortunately, a friend of mine who heard my cry, she was like, yeah, I attend Sabbath already. And then she told me about another group that was in Raleigh. And unfortunately, it was the Hebrew Israelites. Immediately jump camp from there. I couldn't take it. Yeah, that's so not where I was going, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, but then, had to sit at home. And that's literally how I came across 119 Ministries and even Arthur Bailey, because I literally just started doing a Google search and praying that I come across something, again, not Hebrew Israelites, but that can get me truth.
Sure.
And I started from there. I literally started from Google searches.
Wow. That's wild.
It's scary, but I just trusted that he was
Well,
going to
sure.
lead me in the correct path. And he did. And now, where before, this was like 8 or 9 years ago, honestly. So where before, I was like kind of afraid to tell people what I believe. Now I couldn't care less what people think about me following truth. I just hope
Absolutely.
that my walk, my lifestyle, what I'm posting, the posts that I share would cause them to ask questions. And some have, some have asked questions. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's big right there. When just one
yes,
person asks a question, you go, wow,
yes.
something happened today.
So everyone knows, oh, Monica's different now. You know, that's what I get on. She's different. She doesn't do Christmas and Easter any longer.
Yeah.
It's funny,
Yeah.
like that's where they go. She doesn't do Christmas and Easter anymore. Like, but it's so much more than that. It's literally a lifestyle, and it's
Sure.
literally following truth
Yeah. The
and
truth that was
recognizing,
lost long time
yeah,
ago.
and recognizing that we have been taught a lot of errors, and being able to come to terms with that and saying, okay, I'm going to humble myself enough to be taught truth and not get too upset that I was taught error for all of these years, for 20
Mm-hmm.
years walking in error. And then finally, 8, 9 years ago, hearing him say, you know, so yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, hallelujah. That's all I
It's a
Yes.
got to say.
wonderful story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you got to share more about that, Monica.
Yeah.
Let's, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was the only thing I was going to say is I'm so much of an introvert. You find that I'm more observed than talk until you get me into a topic that I like to share. So, thanks,
All
Jules.
right, y'all. Let's start in prayer. And we're just going to offer this time up to Yah. We have an unconventional study today. Yah did not give me my topic until 1 a.m. this morning. He confirmed it again when I woke up. We're going to be studying the life of Joseph. And he has specifically given me two phrases regarding the study in the life of Joseph. Number one, the obscure ones are coming forth. Okay, that's one phrase he gave me. The obscure ones are coming forth. And number two, found worthy in the waiting. Okay, found worthy in the waiting. So let's start in prayer, and then we're gonna dive into praise reports, and then we're gonna dive into the word. Father, we thank you today for the season of your spirit upon us. We thank you that we are in the 6th month of the biblical calendar, which many call Elul, and that tradition states that the king is in the field. We thank you that your revelation is here with us and upon us through your Holy Spirit. And we welcome and invite you to draw close to us as we draw close to you today. We ask you to tangibly come and visit each of our locations and bring us your peace and your joy and your comfort and your correction and conviction wherever we need it. We lift our hearts to you to elevate our perspectives, and we ask you to open the wonders of your word to us, to reveal your mysteries to us as we come to you, that you would tell us great and unsearchable things we've never seen before. We bring ourselves totally under King Yeshua's lordship, and we trust you to do a thorough work in our hearts today. Meeting your spirit with your written word, that we would become well-versed in living in and wielding your double-edged sword of truth. In Yeshua's mighty name. Amen. All righty. Anybody have any praise reports today?
I would like to give one. I'm thankful for the fast that we were on last week. I'm thankful because he did such a cleansing, naturally and spiritually. He did such a cleansing for me. And what I mean by that is he was able to show me some areas of my life that was just pure idolatry. And I'm thankful and grateful for that, because that's always my prayer, that I don't have anything before my eyes before him. And during that time of just being totally silent and listening to him, he was able to show me those areas that that I need to put aside. Either it wasn't of him, or that the purpose season is up. And then also those areas, like I said, I just put before him, maybe because it was a little bit of fear there and I was relying on certain things other than him. So anytime he shows me and he reveals my heart to me, I'm always very thankful, and I praise and thank Yah for that, because I'm not blinded to hearing him, if you will. So I was able to hear him enough to say, you put this before me and you have to shut it down. And the fact that I was humble enough to actually put it aside is just amazing, because I could be hard-hearted. So I just thank him for being able to reveal my heart, and me not being so stubborn to try to hold on to what I didn't want to let go of.
Hallelujah for that. I find it so precious when we have these deeper, closer, more intimate times with him, and he just pulls us in and reveals more of his heart and what he wants from us, and how much closer he wants to be than we are presently walking with him. And gosh, there's just nothing I love more.
For me, it was interesting because I've never done a 3-day fast. And you find that when you give your mind to Yah, even I must say, I had a lot of distractions around here. When my grandson's here and then my daughter drops by with the others, I can get very distracted, but it still kept me on the right path. And that's another thing he showed me, definitely was distraction. This brain goes 20 miles an hour and there's too many people around me. But I was like, yeah, how come I'm not hearing from you? I don't hear from you at all, like for a long time. And it was because of the distractions. So we had some pretty wild storms here, and literally woke me up a couple of nights ago out of a dead sleep. and told me it was like 2:07 in the morning. And what I heard was, let my children know to embrace for the traumatic storms. So that will be, I was asking him, is that meaning the weather? Because it's so crazy and unusual and it's everywhere. Or you mean the storms of our lives? So that'll be an interesting thing we pray about. I feel like it's both, really, when you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was happy, so happy to hear from him. And I haven't honestly heard something, probably like 3-4 years now.
That's really monumental to hear something from him this week after the fast. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very, very excited and look forward to more now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really just about giving him the time. You realize how much time you can talk to him all day long, but when you're fasting, it's different because you really have to go to him more often, just because you're so used to eating. And when you're around that and you smell it, it's like you have to focus and stay on track with him.
Yeah.
And he helps you.
Yeah. He sure does. And, I mentioned in the chat to some of you ladies, I nearly veered off the path the first night of fasting, and I wasn't even around food, but I had to be in the fridge to get a drink, and I saw something and honestly, it was mindless. It was just like, oh, well, I'm just going to grab something in my hands and whoa, 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 wait, what am I doing? Hold on. Okay. It was just this mindless little impulse. And so I had to stop right then and pray, okay, Father, I need you to quicken me. Okay. So that I do not put anything in these lips because I have made a vow to you and I need to keep it.
I'm grateful I didn't get quite to that point, but I certainly was made aware of the weakness of my flesh. I think I might have mentioned to a few of you ladies beforehand that before I started the fast that I don't typically eat a lot during the day because I'm working, and usually if I'm at work and I eat, then I just want to go to sleep. So I don't typically eat too much until I get home. And then when I'm home, I just kind of like to graze. So um, during the fast, I wasn't hungry, but when I was home, I just wanted to eat because it was there in front of my face. So that's my praise report, that I'm so grateful that he showed me where there's weakness in my flesh that I can give to him and try to overcome and let him to take care of that, because I don't need this weakness in the flesh. The flesh is for the destruction and it needs to get gone. So I'm very grateful that he showed me those areas of weakness in my flesh.
Amen to that. Yeah. And Yah showed me something last night. This isn't specifically pertaining to the fast. It was several days after we ended it, but I've been talking to him a lot about some recent developments in my life and the betrayals, the backstabbings, people treating me in ways that are very brazenly ungodly, and just having a conversation with him. And I don't know if I can get this quote right. I wrote it down last night and then I forgot to pull my notes up. But he essentially said to me, and I'm going to be clear, this is a paraphrase. I don't like to misquote Yah. Okay. He said to me something to the effect of, I have allowed this to occur in your life in order to purify you of the pain. So in a controlled, small environment, so that when you are falsely accused and betrayed in larger, more public circles, you will be unshakable.
Amen.
Okay. Because there have been two situations really almost back to back here and they've been in very small, cloistered environments. But I was so grateful to hear that from him because he's
Amen.
told me that there are days ahead when I will be pretty widely exposed, okay, just because the path he will have me walk will be a fairly public one. And he's told me the time is coming when Satan will be so intent on stopping the advance of Yah's kingdom that he will have so few tools left, his propagandists will actually mock me live on primetime TV because they won't have anything else to do to stop me. Okay. And I take that to mean they're going to feel so powerless. It's not a bad thing that this is coming, but it's going to be painful. And so
Right.
I'm just really, really grateful that he's allowing these smaller, cloistered situations to purify me of the pain, is what he said.
I think that's so
I will be
beautiful.
unshakable. Go ahead.
Sorry, Jules.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I think that's so beautiful. And it reminds me of the story of Yeshua when he was on earth, and then afterwards the apostles, how they were going around ministering to the different nations, and how, you know, how many times did they, which one was it that they boiled in water? I mean, in oil.
John.
That
Yeah,
was John, and they were unsuccessful. Yeah.
exactly. And, you know, there were so many times where they've tried to kill them to shut them up, and they've tried to do this and they've tried to do that and they've tried to do something else. And the verse that comes to mind is, if you deny me, I'll deny you. So, you know, the fact that he's taken the time to help you build your resilience in this manner so that you don't get to a point where you deny him because of the pain. I think that's such a beautiful thing. That's such just wow.
Right. I was thinking the same thing, Shireen. Exactly. Because that's what Yeshua went through. That's what the disciples went through. And
Yeah,
remember when
exactly.
Peter took offense and he whacked the priest's ear off? Was it the priest or the soldier? I can't remember. The soldier?
Yes.
Well, what did
Funny,
Yeshua
but
do? He put it back on. Like he's teaching him, you know what? You better not take offense now, buddy, because your time's coming too.
yeah,
See?
yeah.
So absolutely.
We don't need no more ears lopped off.
Right? I mean, he took offense for Yeshua. He loved him.
Yeah.
But he was trying to teach him, no. Because he was going to be
How we behave.
publicly, you know, ashamed in front of everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree, Jules. It's a tough place to be in, but it's going to be where you'll literally just be like, nope, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'll be okay. And I think it's going to
I'm
get
just
tough.
so grateful. You know, he's already testing us and preparing us in advance for whatever he's prepared us to walk in. You know, Ephesians 2:10 says all of our deeds were prepared in advance so that we could fulfill them. Well, he knows what's coming up for each of us in each of our lives, and he's preparing us now for whatever we will need to stand in the midst of. And I'm just so grateful that he's such a good and I don't know that this is the right word, predictive. He's the omnipotent, the omniscient Father who is prepared for everything.
Well, and you're right. And sometimes I think we're tougher than what we think we are. I know I think I'm tougher than what I am. And he's definitely showing me, not so much, Joyce. We got some work to do here.
That comment you made, Jules, reminds me of the 6 Ps. Perfect planning and preparation prevents poor performance. So being as omnipresent and omnipotent as he is, he's got plans and preparations in place for everything so that we don't end up performing poorly.
You know, in all my years on the earth, I've never heard it put quite like that. You're gonna have to text me that, sis. I love that.
I'll do that.
All right. Any other praise reports before we dive into Genesis 37?
Well, I was very thankful to make it through the fast. Um, I I found it quite difficult for reasons I didn't really expect or realize, I guess. And but I was really happy because uh, you know, there were times when I thought about, okay, I have a day and a half to go. Can I make it? And I would start to kind of panic, like, how can I handle this, And it wasn't so much the hunger. It wasn't that. Um, in some ways it was kind of easy, but I realized that my life is so uncomfortable, that, I mean, just from sun up to sundown, it's difficult and uncomfortable, and I'm constantly having to, you know, control myself, because of all the provocation, and so to have yet another discomfort was kind of put me over the edge. So I had to think about the when Jules, when you uh suggested that there be an ongoing fast thing, and I'm like, oh my, I don't know if I can do that. So I had to really think about it and pray about it. But in the nitty-gritty of difficulties, um, y'all makes a way. And so I finally, I think it was yesterday, was sure that I could do it, maybe not the same fast that we did the last time, but a fast, one of them. And so I'm really um grateful that I think what I got, I know this is kind of a nitty-gritty thing, but not super spiritual or anything, but just to knowing that when I live thinking I'm at my screaming edge, that I'm not quite, you know, that I really, that um Yah has a way, even when it might be more extreme than a lot of people live. It's still, Yah has a buffer zone for me, and I'm not on the edge of the cliff, so to speak. So, um, because I have experienced this before, and with the first round of kids, and feeling like I was beyond my screaming edge for years, living in the queue out there, and I didn't want to live like that again. So I feel blessed to know that. So that was, like I said, not super spiritual, kind of a nitty-gritty thing, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it.
That's wonderful. And Ellie, I just want to encourage you because I really feel like you described some of my process over the years in how Yah brought me into a deeper understanding, I think, of my own condition through pressing me into fasting and things like that. And I remember at one point I was responding essentially, look, I have so few physical comforts and things that feel good in my life. And now you're going to take food from me too? Are you serious? I don't want to go. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
my food.
yeah. I mean, it was, yeah, it's exactly right. It's like that was kind of the one thing I could at least take 15 or 20 minutes and um yeah, feel taken care of, in a way, and refreshed in a way, and
Mhm.
so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I just want to offer encouragement because what I found, and it wasn't obvious necessarily after, one fast or two fasts, but what I found, I guess, over the process is fasting forced me to seek my comfort in Yah and nowhere else. Okay. So that I didn't have any other crutches in the flesh at all. Like there was nothing left. And it yielded such a crop of spirit life in me that I could not possibly have foreseen. And I just love that so many of us have testimonies of how Yah broke us through and advanced us and gave us new revelation and showed us things about ourselves simply because that's his nature. When we make this little effort, he comes and he meets us truly powerfully, and he just propels us into growth and into, higher heights and deeper roots. And it's an awesome process.
I agree. I realize how much food is a comfort to me instead of Yah at times. Just going to eat something because you're frustrated or upset, or it just gives you comfort. As I think I've told you, chocolate chip cookies are my comfort. So when you're giving stuff up, it takes you to that place where you're like, wow, you don't realize how much you realize on that very, you depend on that very thing to get you through instead of Yahweh.
I agree, Joyce. Yeah. He's pushing us into maturity in the spirit realm, and we're all feeling the growth. It's really been just amazing to watch.
What I find amazing is, we're putting a little bit of effort in toward him, and like you said, Jules, we put in a little bit of effort and he meets us, but it's like the effort's 10% our part and 90% his part. It doesn't seem balanced at all, but he just keeps showing up like with huge, incredible blessings with us doing what seems to be such a little thing.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I really believe this is what it means to be yoked with Yeshua when he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I wrestled with that for so many years. Like, how can a yoke and a burden be easy and light? What are you talking about? This is crazy, because I only had a negative perception, okay, of him and of what a yoke and a burden could be. But at one point, he broke through and he said, "Look, when oxen are yoked together, there's a coupling, and I'm inviting you to come and be coupled with me and to walk in my gate, to walk in union with me, because it's easy and light. It is not a burden on your back, it is a coupling." And that changed everything.
Yeah, amen.
All right, let's dive into Genesis 37. So for those of you just joining, as I explained in the first couple of minutes of the video before we prayed, I do not have a study guide today. Yah did not give me my topic until 1 a.m. I was in prayer multiple times this week. There was a lot of drama in circles around me that was very distracting, but I wasn't able to pull all the way out of it. So Yah confirmed it again this morning, but I do not have a study guide. But he did give me those two phrases that I put in the chat. Number one, the obscure ones are coming forth. Number two, found worthy in the waiting. And so we are going to really dive deep into the life of Joseph today. I don't have anything prepared. We're just going to trust Holy Spirit to bring forth gold as we read and discuss. Okay? All right, starting in Genesis 37, I'll read first if somebody else wants to read after me. Verse 1. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel, that is Jacob, loved Joseph more than any other of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." The man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin on the way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and I, where can I turn?" Then they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They had the long robe with sleeves taken to their father, and they said, "This we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Thus his father bewailed him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Any comments on that?
The thing that comes to my mind is the jealousy, you know. I know it's not right for Jacob to have had favorites, but it's a parent's right to do whatever they want, kind of, sort of, within reason. That's not quite accurate, but you understand what I'm saying. And so the jealousy of the other siblings, because they didn't have hearts that were leaning on Yah, is what has caused this evil to befall him.
You know, I get a glimpse of this sometimes with my cats, which is kind of funny because I don't have kids, obviously. But I have one particular cat who, when I'm in the kitchen, she guards the entrance to the kitchen from the other cats and literally chases them off so they cannot come near me. It's hysterical. She thinks that I'm her property. It's only in the kitchen. It's not anywhere else.
That is awesome. That is so funny.
She's the one who gives the beat down to the other cat. And sometimes I've just had as much as I can take of it. But here Jacob fostered this jealousy.
With the robe.
Yeah.
It just boggles my mind that he didn't recognize the dynamic he was setting up among his own sons. And maybe even daughters too. We're not really told how the daughters play into all this dynamic.
Yeah.
Well, think of what he looked like walking through the field with this robe on, right? Like, I'm gonna look for my brothers and he still has the robe on too. I find that interesting. Like, look at me. He seems like he's an oddball is what I'm trying to say. But he's not. It's kind of like John the Baptist, right? He was so different. And everybody looked at him like, and I'm sure as that man even saw him in that robe, what was he even thinking? Like, what's this kid doing wandering out here in this robe? But he was set apart.
He was set apart. He was a one of a kind, clothed in a garment that marked him as one of a kind. And he didn't have another of his kind around him. Yeah.
And sometimes we think people that are odd are so different and weird, and that too. And look at him. Look what he turns out to be. Can't judge a book by its cover is what I'm saying. You know, sometimes we tend to do that. Here he had this beautiful robe on wandering around, and most people be like, okay, that's a weird dude. Little did they know what Yah was going to do with him.
I'm looking up verse 15 right now in the Septuagint. Give me a second here to pull this up because I want to see what it says. Because in the translation I read, the NRSV, it said a man saw him. But the KJV says a certain man saw him and pointed him to his brothers. So let me find this here. Another thing that I continually see in the passages about Joseph is he's such a type and shadow of Christ.
Yep.
You know, the
Yeshua.
one and only among his brothers, marked even in the way you see him in this coat of many colors, you know, marking him as representing all nations, all skin tones, all tribes. And as I'm looking this up in the Septuagint, the other thing that comes to mind, because I did a little bit of study on this morning, is Joseph nearly met his death in Shechem. Okay, now Shechem was the piece of property that Jacob had. I think he purchased it. I would have to go back and look. Okay, but it belonged to Jacob. Okay, and he did not physically die at this time because Reuben stepped in to intervene. But ultimately, after the Israelites left Egypt, they took the bones of Joseph with them and they buried him in Shechem. So there's this full circle completion over the course of several hundred years, at least 500 years. We're not exactly sure how long it took them to bury the bones in Shechem.
Well, the thing that this might be what you're saying, Jules, but this just came to my mind that, you know, he might not have physically died the death of the bodily death in Shechem at that point in time, but once he was sold into Egypt, Joseph was dead as he knew it was known.
Yes.
So he did die in Shechem. So for his bones to be buried there kind of is poetic, shall we say? It might not be the right word,
truly.
but you know, his identity died there when he went to Egypt, and then he became a great man that everybody turned to when there was hardship.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the Septuagint, I'm going to read from Brenton's here in verse 15 and 16. It doesn't really change a whole lot. And a man found him wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, "What seekest thou?" And he said, "I'm seeking my brethren. Tell me where they feed their flocks." Verse 17, and the man said to him, "They have departed hence, for I heard them saying, Let us go to Dothan." And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Okay. The thing that Yeshua has pointed out to me is, as many of us know in the Torah, there's nothing extra. There's no filler. Every Hebrew letter that we read translated into our languages was placed by the will of Yah in proper position for a specific reason. If something is mentioned, it matters. If something is repeated, it matters especially. And here we are given 3 verses about this interaction with a man who specifically pointed Joseph to his brothers, where he would be betrayed, nearly killed, emotionally killed, his identity was killed, stripped of his garment, and sold into slavery. What do you make of this?
First thing that comes to my mind is that he's either an angel of Yah or it's a manifestation of Yah.
Yeah. That's the conclusion that I've come to. That an angel of Yah or Yeshua himself literally pointed Joseph to the place where he would be betrayed, his identity would be slaughtered, his cloak would be stripped from him, and he would be sold into slavery. And we're going to come back to that because, kind of like the Shechem thing, it comes full circle. Okay. We're going to come back to that with a passage in Genesis chapter 50, I think it is. Anything else in Genesis 37?
The interesting thing is that Joseph rose to the top in every circumstance. It wasn't just when Pharaoh made him second in command. He rose to the top and the Potiphar's house, and he literally was the CEO of Potiphar's house, right?
Yeah.
He was the head of Potiphar's house. Then he's thrown in prison, and he becomes somehow in charge of that. They made him in charge of that. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then, so it's like the Father made him, rose him, no matter where he was thrown into, he rose to the top. And there's probably a lesson there for us. That no matter what we're thrown into, you know what I mean? Then y'all can use us. Hi, Goose.
Hi, Jack, sweetie. How are you, buddy? Thank you, Ellie.
I have a thought about what Ellie just said. It's interesting, actually, how she mentioned that, Joseph went through the trial of being sold and having his identity killed. And then he was sold to Potiphar and he rose to the top of Potiphar's house. And then he has another trial where he's accused of sleeping with Potiphar's wife. And then he's sent to jail. And then he grows up through the ranks in jail. And then he goes to Pharaoh because he can interpret Pharaoh's dream, I think, if I remember correctly. Anyway, it's like he continually goes through these trials to be reminded and broken so that he doesn't become prideful and boasting. It's like he still needed to be brought back down to earth as well so that he could remain in pliable clay form so that Yah can shape him to what he needed to be.
How about the fact that his brothers come later and he could have had them all killed? Instead, it shows he's emotional and he cries. And then he sends for the youngest brother at the time because he knew. It wasn't like he was trying to get revenge because he could have easily. He didn't. He actually forgave them and had a party with them. Sound familiar, right?
And he said,
it does.
Yeah. And he said his perspective was, the coolest thing was when they were bemoaning what they'd put him through, his perspective was, I'm here for such a time as this. The Father was in charge, and I am here. I was sent ahead basically to save you. It's amazing.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to get back to, Ellie. That's the point I was making regarding the man who specifically pointed him to his brothers, to the place where he would be betrayed, stripped, sold into slavery, all of that. Because Joseph can say truthfully, you intended this for harm, but Yah himself intended it for good and sent me here to save your lives and many others.
Yeah.
How many of us can say truthfully, Yah sent me into that betrayal that absolutely wrecked the trajectory of my life to save lives in the coming years? I mean, that's a pretty, well, maybe not pretty, that's an incredibly remarkable testimony. It doesn't get better than that. But it reminds me of what Yeshua said, or what was said of Yeshua rather, that he was willingly stripped of everything he had in heaven to come to earth, to make the way for us. And that's a terrible paraphrase. He put off everything to make the way for us, that many lives might be saved. And he knew God sent him here.
Yeah.
That's why I said, take up your cross and follow me, because it seems like pretty much the way is where we have to be willing to lay down our lives in some form. Maybe not our physical life, but in some way.
How are you doing this?
Yeah.
You know, another thing that strikes me here is the brothers took counsel together. Okay. This is kind of the language of Psalm 2. They took counsel together against I'm going to call him the anointed of his father. Okay. The favored of his father, to profit off of him, bringing their father and his father extraordinary grief until he was reconciled with his son. And it was only Joseph himself, upon recognizing his brothers many years later in Egypt, who insisted on the reconciliation. There's no indication in the text, and we'll get into that in a little bit, that the brothers would have offered to bring the father to Egypt to be reconciled to Joseph. But Joseph made the reconciliation. The brothers were perfectly content, or at least dishonest, and perhaps stuck or lazy enough in their ways, that they were going to allow their father to continue to grieve his long lost son.
Well, that tells you a couple of things there in my mind. The first of it being that Joseph obviously knew the command that if you don't forgive your brothers, I can't forgive you. And the other thing that it brings to my mind is that the brothers probably had huge amounts of shame and guilt and other unknown feelings that they didn't know how to process, and they were potentially concerned about breaking their father's heart again over them all for lying to him the way they did. So they were trying to avoid a situation of getting themselves in trouble by letting the status quo remain the same.
Yeah. And then the other thing that comes to mind here is, there's so many parallels between Yeshua and the Heavenly Father, but breaking that parallel for a second, you have Jacob, who did not see the destiny of Yah upon his son, and so simply fell into agreement with the lie his sons presented him, and honestly believed his son Joseph was dead. After all the dreams and the prophecies that had been made over Joseph, he didn't seek Yah for clarification and answers. He's not a model of how to handle things. When we receive what looks like a closed door to a prophecy, to a word, to a destiny assignment, okay? Do we just receive that no from the mouths of liars? Or do we press into Yah and say, but Yah, hold on here. I thought you gave me this destiny. I thought you gave me this promise. I thought this son had this assignment over his life. Surely that's not been aborted. What's going on here?
I'd never put that together before. You're right. Amazing.
Well, and after all Jacob had personally seen Yah do for him, I mean, by this point, it's only like 3 or 4 chapters earlier. Sorry, hold on. My cat just came, plopped himself down on my lap, and yanked my earpiece out of my ear. Okay, so it's only like 3 or 4 chapters earlier that Jacob is wrestling with Yeshua himself at Peniel. Okay, he's literally encountered Yah himself in the flesh, wrestled with him. And now we see him not seek Yah in the face of this. Yeah, it's not a model for the way to handle this.
Well, it makes me think of Abraham as well, because Abraham, as much as the story of Abraham is presented as though he was so close to Yah and they had a really amazing relationship and he was so obedient and he was this and that and everything else, if you actually break down the story of Abraham, he was just a regular human being man going through the trials of life and succumbing to his flesh just like everybody else. And I believe that it's actually only 7 times during the course of Abraham's life that he actually spoke with God. And, the number of times that they tried to take situations into their own hands and they didn't trust in God and believe that Yah had told them what was going to happen and then allow it to be done in Yah's timing because, they were 100 years old before they had Isaac. And prior to that, Abraham's wife, what's her name? Anyway, she said, "Here's my handmaiden, go and have relationship with her so that you can have an heir, so that, this is God's will." But instead of just waiting for it to be Yah's timing according to his will, then they're trying to take the situation into their own hands. So, all of the fathers of the children of Israel, they're all human. None of them actually had a perfect walk through life, which was a perfect example of how to live.
Right. It says in verse 11 that Jacob, his father kept the matter in mind. So he was thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Anything else in chapter 37 before we move to chapter 38? Okay. Who wants chapter 38?
I can read it. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
I have a tiger in the middle of my chapter 38. Excuse me, tiger. Come here. Okay. And at that time it came to be that Yehuda left his brothers and turned aside to a man, an Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her and went into her. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name And she conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again, and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Kezib when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar.
Shireen,
Yes?
tell you what, I'm skipping ahead here. I'm looking at the rest of the chapter. Joseph is not mentioned.
Okay.
Let's skip to chapter 39, and we're just going to stay on the track of Joseph.
Okay, sure. Yep.
Thank you.
No trouble. And Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, Mitzrayite, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. And it came to be that Yah was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man, and was in the house of his master, the Mitzrayite. And his master saw that Yah was with him, and that Yah made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his eyes, and served him, and he appointed him over his house, and gave into his hand all that he had. And it came to be from the time that he appointed him over his house, and all that he had, that Yah blessed the Mitzrayite's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of Yah was on all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left in Joseph's hand all that he had, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. And Joseph was handsome in form and handsome in appearance. And after these events, it came to be that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused, and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has given it into my hand all that he has. No one is greater in this house than I, and he has not withheld whatever from me but you, because you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and sin against Elohim?" And it came to be, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not listen to her, to lie with her, to be with her. And it came to be on a certain day, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and fled and ran outside. And it came to be, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house, and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to be, when he had heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me, and fled and went outside. And she kept his garment with her until his master came home. And she spoke to him these same words, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me." So it came to be, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. And it came to be, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, "Your servant did to me according to these words," that his displeasure burned. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But Yah was with Joseph, and extended loving commitment to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And the prison warden gave into the hand of Joseph all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there was his doing. The prison warden did not look into any point that was under Joseph's hand, because Yah was with him, and whatever he did, Yah made it prosper. It's interesting to me how Joseph didn't feel the need to defend himself against false accusation. He just kind of took it on the chin and went to jail and said, "Have a good day."
I feel like in verse 3 and 4, his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands, just like Yeshua. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. He made him overseer of the house. That makes me think of the house of Israel, and put him in charge of all that he had. A lot of times when I read, I try to put Yeshua in every picture or myself to see where everything's at. And that's what it feels like. Yeshua's over Yah's house. And that's what I'm seeing when I'm looking at those two verses, even though it's Joseph.
Yeah.
And
well,
he said overseer, in the house and over all he had.
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, down at the end of the chapter, and even in the prison, the overseer, he gave the prison into the hand of Joseph and all the prisoners as well. So you have Joseph as the head of Potiphar's house. Then you have Joseph as the head of the prison, overseeing the well-being of the prisoners. All of these are prophecies of Yeshua. Okay. That Yeshua was sent into a spiritual Egypt. Hosea 11, verse 1 says, out of Egypt I call him my son. This is why Yeshua and his family, even as a toddler, had to be sent physically to Egypt so that prophecy could be true in the natural, where it's true of us in the spirit, okay? That Yeshua would be called out of Egypt as his son, so that we could be called out of Egypt as Yah's children, okay? So Yeshua walked in the natural, all these prophecies, to fulfill them for us in the spirit. And here he is. He's just all over the life of Joseph. He had favor. And verse 28, because of him, the chief keeper of the prison knew nothing, for all things were in the hand of Joseph. I mean, again, I'm just reminded that we're told Yeshua was given all authority to judge. He's gonna be the one who does all the judging. Okay. And we're going to judge alongside him. But it's not the Father who judges, it's the Son. Because everything has been given into his hand. And here it is, already prophesying the life of Joseph.
In verse 8, but he refused and said to his master's wife, look with me here. My master has no concern about anything in the house. He has put everything that he has in my hand. So awesome. And the temptation of the wife, right? It's typical when you see that, out in the real world. Torah keepers, Christian alike, how that's very big with adultery and just how strong you're going to have to be to survive so many things that are going on within the church.
What strikes me is this is the second time now that we've been told that Joseph was stripped of his outer garment.
Yeah.
And what I see prophetically is this is Satan's attempt to continually strip Joseph of his covering spiritually, of his mantle, okay, that he carried on his life, to keep him from fulfilling that. But all of Satan's attempts could not do that because they were all serving Yah's purposes. Anything else in this chapter? Yeah, Melanie says Yeshua led captivity captive. Yes. We see that all over this chapter. Even descending into the pit, descending into Hades, was prophesied. Here at the end of the chapter. Okay, let's move on to Genesis 40. Who wants that?
I can read it, Jules.
Thank you.
Now it now it happened that after these things, the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. And the captain of the bodyguard appointed Joseph as overseer over them, and he attended to them, and they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in jail, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. Now Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, and behold, they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, saying, "Why are your faces so sad today?" Then they said to him, "We have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to him, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Recount it to me, please." So the chief cupbearer recounted his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me when it goes well with you, and please show me loving kindness by remembering me to Pharaoh and getting me out of this house. For I was in fact stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into the pit." And the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably, so he said to Joseph, "I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket, there were some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Then Joseph answered and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head off of you and will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you." Thus it happened on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. You know, what I thought about just when I was reading that, and I never thought of it before, so I don't have the fullness of it. But the 3 days I thought about resurrection and how we're all going to be resurrected to judgment. One's going to be restored and one's going to be punished and judged and sent to the lake of fire. So that's what I thought of there. But what I also thought of was how Joseph remained faithful regardless of the word that he had to give. So one was favorable, but yet one wasn't so pleasant. So one, he had to tell them, "You're going to be restored." So we always want to hear the pleasant words, right? But then there was one where he had to say, "Hey, you're going to be hung." And Joseph did not waver in what he had to say. And that's how we have to be when it comes to the word of Yah. When we're given something to say, we have to say it regardless of what it is, regardless of whether it's deemed good or bad, favorable or judgment. We have to deliver that word. And then the other thing that came as I was reading, sorry, it kept dropping in me. The other thing that came while I was reading is that Joseph remained faithful even in the midst of him being in prison. And he asked them, hey, but remember me. And yet the people did not remember him. And he yet still had to hold on to his faith. He had to still hold on to his belief. It goes back to what you were saying, Jules, how his father didn't seek Yah to see the fullness of the matter. Like, I know of the words that were spoken over my son, but yet I'm going to believe the mouth of liars that said he's dead. And so here, I see that Joseph yet had to remain faithful even while he was in prison. So it just lets me know that even in those rough times, you know, they're going to come, that I have to yet remain faithful in everything.
Yes, and that's a good point. And we're actually going to get into one of the Psalms toward the end here, where it says that the word of Yah tried Joseph until it came to pass while he was actually locked up in prison.
Oh,
And
wow.
I wanted to make another point. Monica, yes, the resurrection theme is all over the baker and the cupbearer. And we have all the themes actually of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection. Okay, even to the point where he lifts up the cup and the bread and says, what? Do this in remembrance of me. Remember me, he says. Well, it's right here in the life of Joseph. It's right here in this passage. Okay, so then you have the death of the baker. You have the essential resurrection of the cupbearer after 3 days, okay, from prison up back into the court of Pharaoh, restored to his job. You have the bread and the wine, the cup and the baking. And you have all the themes of Yeshua's Last Supper and resurrection right here, all tied up in this passage. And I'm thinking about the blessings. And Monica, you may know these. You know, the traditional Hebrew blessings that are not explicitly written in scripture. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Yes.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, who causes bread to spring forth from the earth. And, you know, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, who brings forth the fruit of the vine. You have those themes here too. Okay. Again, with death, burial, and resurrection. 3 days, 3 nights, death, and then restoration. And it's amazing. So when Yeshua said to his disciples, the scriptures foretold of me, and then, you know, we're told in the Gospels that he opened their eyes to see all that was written of him. These are the passages that he was talking about. He was foretold in all of this.
It's such an amazing thing, or maybe that's not the right word, but it blows my mind how much people in modern Christianity believe that the Old Testament is, or the Torah, whatever label you want to put on it, is irrelevant now, because the life of Jesus and the apostles and everything that they ministered to people and everything that they spoke was the Old Testament.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're explicitly told that he opened to them the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, or the Psalms. Some passages say that's in one of the Gospels. Okay. And revealed to them all that was prophesied of him. It's all here.
Yeah. Well, there would have been nothing There would have been nothing for Jesus to actually use as his testimony and gospel as he ministered to people throughout the earth, except for direct word from his Father, if it were not for the Old Testament.
Yeah. Yeah. Gwendolyn, go ahead, dear.
Thank you. I was just going to say, Shireen, that basically in Christianity today, I think the sad fact is people do not read the Old Testament. They really are not terribly familiar with it. And I know that by the evidence with respect to our brothers who are still caught up in Adventism. And sadly, Adventism is pretty much just like any other religion on the face of the earth. So the Old Testament, they just are not familiar with it. It's basically only the New that they read.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's why it says in Ecclesiastes 1:9, what is it? What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. Everything. Yah does not do anything without us knowing about it. That's what's
so
cool.
true too, Joyce. That's so true.
That's a great application of that passage, Joyce. Okay. Anything else here in chapter 39, or shall we move on to 40? All right. Anyone want 40?
It would be 41, right, Jules?
Sorry. Yes, it would be. I'm flipping back and forth between the Septuagint and my other Bible app here. So yes, 41.
I can read it.
Thank you, Shireen.
And it came to be at the end of 2 years' time that Pharaoh had a dream and saw him standing by the river, and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat, and they fed amongst the reeds. Then saw 7 other cows coming up after them out of the river, ugly and lean of flesh, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and lean of flesh cows ate up the 7 beautiful looking and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke, and he slept and dreamed a second time, and saw 7 heads of grain coming up on one stalk, plump and good, and saw 7 lean heads scorched by the east wind coming up after them. And the 7 lean heads swallowed up the 7 plump and complete heads. Then Pharaoh awoke and saw it was a dream. And it came to be in the morning that his spirit was moved, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh related to them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my crimes this day, when Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker. Each one of us dreamed a dream in one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. And there was with us a Hebrew youth, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we related to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream, and it came to be as he interpreted for us, so it came to be. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And he shaved and changed his garments and came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. Now I myself have heard it said of you that you understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. Let Elohim answer Pharaoh with peace. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, in my dream I stood on the bank of the river, and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat, and they fed amongst the reeds. Then saw 7 other cows coming up after them, poor and very ugly and lean of flesh, such ugliness as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the lean of flesh and ugly cows ate up the first 7, the fat cows. Yet when they had eaten them up, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. Also, I looked in my dream and saw 7 heads coming up on one stalk, complete and good. Then saw 7 heads, withered, lean, and scorched by the east wind, coming up after them. And the lean heads swallowed the 7 good heads. And I spoke to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. It is one dream. And the 7 lean and ugly cows which came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty heads scorched by the east wind are 7 years of scarcity of food. This is the word which I spoke to Pharaoh. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. See, 7 years of great plenty are coming in all the land of Egypt. But after them 7 years of scarcity of food shall arise, and all the plenty be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the scarcity of food shall destroy the land. And the plenty shall not be remembered in the land because of the scarcity of food following, for it is very severe. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the word is established by Elohim, and Elohim is hastening to do it. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint overseers over the land, to take up 1/5 of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. And let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And the food shall be for a store for the land for the 7 years of scarcity of food which shall be in the land of Egypt. And do not let the land be cut off by the scarcity of food. And the word was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the spirit of Elohim? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. Be over my house, you yourself, and at your mouth all my people shall kiss. Only in the throne I am greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took his seal ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he dressed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the 2nd chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, bow the knee. And he set him over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without a word from you, let no man lift his hand or foot in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name 𝙎𝙤𝙨, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, sovereign of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 years of plenty, the ground brought forth generously. And he gathered all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Thus Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sand of the sea, until he ceased counting, for it was without number. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of scarcity of food came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for Elohim has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for Elohim has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenty which were in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of scarcity of food began to come, as Joseph had said, and the scarcity of food was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. But when all the land of Egypt hungered, and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he says to you." And the scarcity of food was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. And the scarcity of food was severe in the land of Egypt. And all the earth came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the scarcity of food was severe in all the earth. Interesting that Joseph's significant prosperity started at the age of 30.
Yes. Same age that the priests were to take their position in the temple. So Yeshua would have entered his service at age 30.
That's kind of the thing. That's the thought that was in my mind, was it was the same age as Yeshua when he was beginning his ministry, so to speak. I know he started as a young boy in the temple, but it was like 30 when he started his ministry, and then 33 when he was crucified, wasn't it?
Well, that's the Freemason story anyway. It's been spread throughout the churches. I don't think we can support that in scripture. The rendering that I have heard that I think most closely follows scripture is that he ministered for 70 weeks and died in his first year. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because he had to fulfill all the Leviticus 23 prophecies of both the Passover lamb as well as the first fruits offering when he raised from the dead. And the lambs for both of those had to be in their first year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, the Freemasons love to push that number 33 into as many stories as they can, though.
Wow, that is wild.
That's
Never
a
heard
valid
that.
point
So
too,
eye-opening,
Jill.
Jill.
Valid point.
That
Yeah.
is.
Oh
That's
my
just wild.
goodness.
Yeah.
Never heard that.
You're right. 33. Oh my goodness.
But
Wow.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence we only have 66 books in our modern canon, 33 times 2. I mean,
Yeah,
come
there's
on,
no such
y'all.
thing as a coincidence. Yeah. Oh my
I
goodness.
can't
That is
believe I
such a-
haven't
of
caught
course
that
that's
one.
coincidence.
All right,
Yeah, I'm
Jules,
like,
you did it to
wow.
us today.
I'm like, now pull the other one. Whatever. Give me a break.
Oh my goodness. That's just
Yeah.
wild.
Yep. Yep. They're constantly fiddling with stuff, trying to change the rhetoric. They want us to believe, even in very subliminal ways, that the 33 man is a perfected man, a complete man. Like, no, we're not doing that. And, I don't want to get off on this rabbit trail here, but the 33 actually comes out of the story, the myth of Nimrod. Okay, because, I think it's Genesis 11, I'd have to go back and look, says, now Nimrod became a mighty one upon the earth. It's heavily conjectured, maybe not spelled out in the text, but heavily conjectured that his DNA was altered. And so the legend goes that he was 66% man and 33% God. Okay, that would be
Oh, wow.
okay, that he became a Nephilim upon the earth. Okay, so that's a whole other, that's a whole other rabbit trail. But that's where the number 33 comes from, that is so idolized by the occultists. And so, they've even laid it over Yeshua when there's not actually evidence that he celebrated 4 Passovers, which is what would had to have happened if he was 33 when he died. Okay. And so I don't have it in front of me, but there's a whole study that lays out the 70-week prophecy of Daniel chapter 9 over the ministry of Yeshua, so that he fulfilled everything in that count perfectly. 62 weeks plus 7 weeks. Okay. And of course, then the end of the 70th week was Shavuot. Okay. Because the 7 weeks was the counting of the Omer that we see prescribed in Leviticus 23. And then the 50th day being the Jubilee on Shavuot, Pentecost, okay, in the temple. And so it all fits. It all fits beautifully and perfectly, but the occultists have they've stuck their fingers in there. They've muddled it with false lines, with false teachings. You know, they tried to obscure, even in the modern text, that Daniel 9:24 through 27 is about Messiah. It's not about a coming Antichrist who will make a 7-year covenant and break it halfway through, blah, blah, blah. No, it's Messiah who was cut off in the middle of the week, but not for himself. He was crucified in the middle of the week on Passover, exactly was prophesied in Scripture. And it was on a Wednesday. It was on a Wednesday. So it was literally in the middle of the week. But that's a slight aside. But that kind of goes with the whole notion that he was not 33 when he died. Okay.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. Wow. I'm so grateful that that has been rearranged in my thought process.
Well,
The deeper we dig, the more we see how many lies we've been fed. And some of it is just simply because our Masoretic text Bibles translated into English have been so messed with. I mean, even the King James shows very clearly that Daniel 9:24 through 27 is about Christ. It is not about Antichrist. But many other renditions since then have shown something different because it's just been so polluted. And Yah gave me a dream some years back about what was done to the canon and how multiple rounds of councils and men came into his house and took unauthorized authority to shoot out the lamps that were his word. And in the, as the word says, Psalm 119, his word is a light unto our path, or a lamp unto our path and a light unto our feet. And in this dream, these men literally came in and used a cannon to shoot out the lights on a chandelier as I was sitting in my father's house. And I was just so shocked by the damage they did. But the chandelier had these individual candle bulbs. Okay. It was like a candelabra, but it was huge, giving off enormous light. They shot out 45% of the chandelier with their cannon. Okay. And so I've never received clarity from Yah in prayer as to how many books we're missing, but he's revealed to me it's a lot. Okay. The 66 book canon is the work of occultists who revere the number 33. It is not the complete work of the complete light under our feet and lamp under our path that Yah wants us to have to illuminate our way.
Wow.
Jules, remember I was telling you the Bible that my sister was going to throw out of my mom's? That it's the new revised one that we were talking.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at it going, wow, there's a lot of extra books. Not even connecting the dots. I did say to myself, there's more than 66 books here.
Yeah.
But it just clicked right when you just said that. I go, oh, geez.
Well, that one that you showed me, that has the whole Catholic Apocrypha, and off the top of my head, I want to say that's like 13 or 14 extra books. And I can't recall exactly. But then in the Aramaic and in the Ethiopic canons, there are even more that are not found in the Catholic canon.
Yeah, you're right.
So pretty fascinating. Once you go down that rabbit trail, you'll never get bored again. Okay, so back to 41. What else is here that you all want to discuss?
Well, I just had come into my mind there how when the cupbearer was restored and he did not remember Joseph to Pharaoh, it was however long time it was before Pharaoh then dreamed the dream, and they had to seek Joseph. But your topic that the phrase that you mentioned at the start, Jules, found worthy in waiting, is quite the prime example of that right there. You know, Joseph was found worthy in the waiting for his time waiting in jail found him worthy to be head of Pharaoh's household.
Yes. Yeah. And in tandem with that, I want to read part of Psalm 105. I'm going to start in verse 16. When he summoned famine against the land and broke every staff of bread, he had sent a man ahead of them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. His feet were hurt with fetters. His neck was put in a collar of iron. Until what he had said came to pass, the word of Yah kept testing him. The king sent and released him. The ruler of the people set him free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his possessions, to instruct his officials at his pleasure and to teach his elders wisdom. We're not explicitly told in the book of Genesis that Joseph really suffered in prison. Do you think that if his feet were in fetters and his neck was put in a collar of iron, do you think he was well fed during that season in prison? Do you think he suffered hunger?
Well, it's interesting because he is still in jail and is still bound, but it doesn't give the impression, like you said, it doesn't give the impression in Genesis that he was having a hard go of it, because he was put in charge of everything that was in the prison. So that doesn't necessarily say he had any special favors or he didn't, but you don't get the impression that he was still bound and hungry.
Right. But we have this other passage that tells us something else. He
That's
suffered.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like the story of Yeshua in the New Testament, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all say the same story, but they all have a little bit of extra detail here and there. So we need to use the same exploratory thought process, I guess, to make sure we get all the information about everything that we need in the Old Testament the way that we would in the New, I suppose.
So here's my thought. For Joseph to be trustworthy over stewarding the food supply of an entire nation that would become the provision point for the known world, he first had to suffer hunger. He had to be tested like Yeshua in every way.
Well, I guess it's kind of like the testing of the flesh, right? Dying of the killing off of the flesh, and how we were just discussing earlier about how we're all blessed so mightily from our fasting and our self-inflicted hunger, shall we say. That's probably not the right way to say it, but how much food has such a control over our lives. So it makes total sense what you're saying, that he, in order to be able to make wise choices and decisions about that, he would have had to have had some form of suffering in it.
I agree.
In verse 14 too, where it says he was hurriedly brought out of the dungeon. You can imagine what that was like. When he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in. So he must have been looking pretty bad. He had to change and clean up before he even could see the Pharaoh.
I agree. And we previously, in our prior series on the sevenfold spirit of Yah, we previously covered the passage where Pharaoh says, is there anyone else like this, one in whom is the spirit of Elohim? Verse 38. Yah was in him. Yah was with him to bring to pass all of the promises over Joseph's life in the midst of this horrendous suffering. These false accusations, the lies, the hunger, being locked in fetters, having his neck in irons. It's horrifying. But Yah was with him. And then back to, the parallel with Yeshua here. Verse 42. Pharaoh removes his signet ring from his hand, puts it on Joseph's hand. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to King Yeshua by the Father. He will do all the judging. It's really powerful. So Joseph was locked in prison and in obscurity. And then one day he was brought forth into Pharaoh's court. And Yah told me this week, the obscure ones are coming forth. Okay. I expect to see several, I'm not sure how many, people that Yah has carefully trained in positions of obscurity or relative obscurity. They may be known in small circles, but I expect them to see come forth and be made very well known because they've been trained, they've been purified, they've been made ready in prisons of sorts, just like Joseph. Yeah, he says right now the Josephs are arising. This is not one of our normal formats for a Bible study, and I was just curious at why Yah would have me do this, and I still don't have all the answers here. Because this isn't what we are used to. He normally has me study through the scripture and create a guide for a topic, and it'll be interesting to see why this was necessary today, to just study through the life of Joseph. Okay, anything else in 41?
Well, isn't the famines kind of like the horses when they're running in Revelation? Some of that's going to happen when everything becomes scarce.
I think there is absolutely an end time parallel here. Yeah. And what's interesting is you have the two sets of 7, okay, the 7 ears of grain and the 7 cows and the 7 years, and it parallels, and I'm not prepared to get into this deeply, but it parallels Leviticus. Let me find it here. Leviticus 16, I think it is, which is the protocol for the Day of Atonements, Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim. Okay. And there are 2 sets of 7 in that chapter, 2, with the sprinkling of the blood by the high priest. And I don't have any notes on that, so I'm not going to get off into that today. But if indeed all the plagues and the judgments in Revelation are a worldwide fulfillment to cleanse the earth, a sort of atonement, if you will, upon the earth, they're going to follow the pattern of the Day of Atonement ceremony laid forth in Leviticus 16. Even down to, we're told in Revelation, the souls cried out from under the altar. I think it's in Leviticus 16. I would have to find it, but it's a rabbit trail. The priests were told to pour the blood out at the base of the altar. Okay. So there is a parallel between the sacrifices in the tabernacle and what we see coming to pass on the earth throughout Revelation. And then you have this, similar set of 2 7s here in the life of Joseph. And I don't profess to fully understand it.
Right.
Okay. Genesis 42. Anybody want that?
I can read it.
Thank you.
When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another? I have heard," he said, "that there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he feared that harm might come to him. Thus, the sons of Israel were among the other people who came to buy grain, for the famine had reached the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. It was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him, with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." Although Joseph had recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. He said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." But he said to them, "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and the one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have said to you, you are spies. Here is how you shall be tested. As Pharaoh lives, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain in prison, in order that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else as Pharaoh lives, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in prison for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here where you are imprisoned. The rest of you shall go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me. Thus your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they agreed to do so. They said to one another, "Alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. This is why this anguish has come upon us." Then Reuben answered them, "Did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you would not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood them, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. He turned away from them and wept. Then he returned and spoke to them. And he picked out Simeon, and he had him bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. This was done for them. They loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. When one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money at the top of the sack. He said to his brothers, "My money has been put back. Here it is in my sack." At this, they lost heart and turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly to us and charged us with spying on the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan.'" Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, "By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me. Take grain for the famine of your households, and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me, and I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will release your brother to you, and you may trade in the land." As they were emptying their sacks, there in each one's sack was his bag of money. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were dismayed. And their father Jacob said to them, I am the one you have bereaved of children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin? All this has happened to me? Then Reuben said to his father, you may kill my two sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should come to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. That's a tough one, huh? Why is the father, I want to ask, why is the father so worried about the baby son? I was kind of thinking about that as I was going through this. Benjamin.
He's got a massive soul tie with him. It's in one of the previous chapters. We didn't read it.
Okay.
I was just thinking about that too as you came to the end of the chapter there, Joyce, about how Jacob's still on with his favoritism. Like, this is my only son left, and he's still got 10 other sons standing there in front of him, or 9 as the case may be.
It's like he didn't trust them at all. He knew something, but I don't know what he doesn't know, but he definitely doesn't trust them.
Yeah, one of the previous chapters actually says his life was bound up with Benjamin because, and maybe it was in the chapter we skipped, I'm not sure, but his life was bound up with Benjamin, and that's because he was the only remaining son of Rachel, his favorite wife.
I was just going to say that. Yep. Okay. Yep. I remember that now. Well, he definitely wasn't recognizable to his brothers. So was he looking like an Egyptian at that point? Was his face painted up?
Well, my thoughts are that, the last time they saw him, he was very young. He would have grown significantly and matured, and he would have been speaking a different language, and he would have been wearing all Egyptian clothing and all that sort of stuff. So, unless they're looking for it without they would have no reason to suspect that it would be their brother. So unless they're looking for it, they probably wouldn't be discerning enough to see it.
But he recognized them.
When you think about Yeshua and what's been done to his reputation, to his image, okay, in the eyes of his brethren by DNA, okay, not talking about the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but let's talk about Judah right now, okay? Doesn't he look like a goy, a Gentile to them right now? All painted up in Christmas and Easter, serving ham on Easter, rising at sunrise Easter morning, sanctioning Easter egg hunts. He looks like an Egyptian. They're going to have their eyes opened very shortly to see who he really is. It's all prophetic. He's the brother who once wore the coat of many colors, now seated in glory, and they still think he's a Gentile.
Kind of like doubting Thomas. He didn't believe.
I'm not sure. Did Thomas ever think that?
Did he actually believe until he stuck his finger in his hand or wrist?
Well, I think that was a little different because that's in John 20, and he was not present that day when, or like a week earlier, when Yeshua appeared post-resurrection and actually
That's
breathed his
true.
spirit on all the others. And so they
Mhm.
had the gift of faith, and he
Okay.
didn't. So Yeshua had to appear to him specially about a week later. But this is, this is a prophetic picture of Yeshua being shrouded and unrecognizable to his brothers. He's seated in glory, having been given all authority, second only to the Father himself. He will do all the judging. Everything in the house that is the earth has been given to him, and they still can't see him. But they will. That's coming in another chapter.
Is it just, do you think, that they can't see because they don't want to see, or it's because um they just haven't had their eyes opened, or they're not discerning, or they don't want to know? Like, I mean, it's the same thing now. If you look around, people go to church and they think they've found God and they think they've found salvation and they're saved and this and that and everything else, but they're just listening to a guy stand in front of a pulpit just talk all day, and they're not seeing what's really there.
I think it's truly that the way Yeshua's been represented as Jesus of the Christians, he's been misrepresented in essentially a pagan costume. Okay. I mean, I don't know how Joseph dressed in Egypt, or whether he had his face painted or a particularly distinctive Egyptian hairstyle. I don't know all the details, but he was married to a daughter of one of the priests of the sun god.
Yeah.
And we're not told he was unfaithful to Yah in any way in that, or that he, like Solomon, went whoring after other gods because of that. Instead, he feared Yah. And for all we know, perhaps she was converted, and Joseph raised his children in the faith of the God of Abraham. But nonetheless, because of all the Egyptian trappings, his brothers couldn't see him. It's the same way. Okay, it's the same way with Judah. They cannot see who Yeshua is because he's been cloaked in all these false traditions.
Yeah.
He doesn't keep the fourth commandment. He doesn't observe the Sabbath. He serves pork on Easter. He doesn't keep the Passover. He certainly doesn't do anything with any of the other feasts. Okay. Pentecost is an entirely made up brand new tradition. He serves communion. What the heck is Passover? He serves these little wafers and little, plastic communion cups. None of that is scripture. None of that is scripture, but that's what's taught.
Yeah.
They can't see him because he's shrouded in the garb of a Gentile.
Yeah.
But his substance remains the same. They're going to have their eyes open to see that the shroud of the Gentile is all man-made tradition. It has nothing to do with the truth of who the real historical King Yeshua actually is, that's actually expressed in his word.
Yeah,
It's a fascinating prophetic parallel. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying they had scales on their eyes.
Mm-hmm. Any other points in chapter 42 before we move on?
Interesting to me also how he gave them their silver back after accusing them of being spies. It's almost like he's setting them up, but you could also see it as being, these are my brothers, I'm going to take care of them.
Yeah. What else? We can move on. Chapter 43. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten up the grain that they had brought up from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little more food." But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, for the man said to us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" Israel said, "Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?" They replied, "The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" Then Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the boy with me, and let us be on our way, so that we may live and not die, you and we, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. You can hold me accountable for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry them down as a present to the man. A little balm and a little honey, gum, resin, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned on the top of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, and be on your way again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he may send back your brother, your other brother, and Benjamin." I'm noting he doesn't even name Simeon by name. Yeah, that other guy's still hanging out in prison there. "As for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved." So the men took the present, and they took double the money with them, as well as Benjamin. Then they went on their way down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." The man did as Joseph said and brought the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money were placed in our sacks the first time that we have been brought in, so that he may have an opportunity to fall upon us, to make slaves of us and take our donkeys." So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke with him at the entrance to the house. They said, "Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food, and when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each one's money in the top of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back with us. Moreover, we have brought down with us additional money to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." He replied, "Rest assured, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father must have put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." Then he brought Simeon out to them. Then the steward had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, and when he had given their donkeys fodder, they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they would dine there. When Joseph came home, they brought him the present that they had carried into the house, and bowed to the ground before him. He inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" They said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and did obeisance. Then he looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." With that, Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with affection for his brother, and he was about to weep. So he went into a private room and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. Controlling himself, he said, "Serve the meal." They served him by himself and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. When they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest men according to his youth, and the youngest according to his youth, the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of them. So they drank and were merry with him. What are your thoughts on this? Anyone? I find it peculiar in verse 11 that Jacob tells them to take some of the choice fruits of the land in their bags and carry them down as a present to the man. How were there choice fruits during a famine if they had to go buy food? I'm not following.
That's a very good point.
Another interesting thing here, you rarely see the title for Yah, El Shaddai. And yet right here in verse 14, may El Shaddai grant you mercy before the man, so that he may send back your other brother and Benjamin. I wonder what the occasion was that Jacob pulled that out. It is used 5 other times in Genesis. The last place it was used prior to that was Genesis 35:11. I'm going to look that up real fast. Yah appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. This is when Yah renamed him and said to him, "Your name is Jacob. You shall no longer be called Jacob, but your Israel shall be your name." So he was called Israel. And Elohim said to him, "I am El Shaddai." Okay, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall spring from you. So then Jacob, Israel, invokes this same title.
So he received the blessing of the name change, and then he's trying to ensure that he is receiving the same blessing to get his children back.
Interesting, isn't it? He doesn't seem to have much use for Simeon, does he? Simeon's just languishing in prison, and Jacob's like, nah, leave him there. You're not taking my other boy. Doesn't even name him by name. Just
No.
like, yeah, that other brother that's still in prison. Yeah, you could bring him back too.
Just leave him there.
Must have been a handful.
You know, it's interesting actually, Jules, the point you raise about where Jacob is using that title for 𝙎𝙬𝙪𝙙𝙪, because the last place that it was used was when he received the name of Israel to be the father of many nations, right? And then it's at this point in time when there's a huge potential possibility that he's going to lose all his children because he's sorely lacking in faith at the present moment. So I guess, you know, he might be feeling a little unworthy of the name Israel, maybe, or the father of many nations, of all of his children disappearing at that particular point in time because of the famine or because of whatever evil that they have bestowed upon themselves with their trying to control the situation, their favoritism and everything else that's not fruitful of Yah. But it's interesting that you mentioned that he pulls out that title again at that particular moment in time in order to ensure that he remains to be father of many nations, I guess.
It's quite an arc. Yeah. It's a good point.
It's interesting to me too how originally there was favoritism with Joseph from Jacob in that, you know, he got the coat of many colors and you know, he was the firstborn of his favorite wife, and there's more favorites again. And Joseph sees how the favoritism ends up giving him a situation where he's no longer with his family. And yet many, many, many years later, he is invoking the same favoritism by giving his brother 5 times the amount of food off his table.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because he knew he had nothing to do with what they did to him too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but is that really forgiveness?
Well, I mean, the little guy wasn't even around when that happened, was he?
No. For all we know, he was just a squirt. Yeah. I don't see any unforgiveness here at all, Shireen. I mean, he invited them into his home. He had them given all the provision they needed for their donkeys to clean up, to dine. They were given portions from his table. They were given ample food, hospitality. I don't see any unforgiveness at all. I just think he's showering extra blessings on top of Benjamin.
Right.
I also think, you know, we've been told twice now that Joseph had to flee from their presence and go cry and go weep because he was just so overcome with emotion. I really think he's feeling his way out. I don't think he has, you know, he clearly doesn't have a script for this situation. He's never been in it before. I don't think he knows how to handle the situation except moment by moment, day by day. As he's trying to figure out, how do I respond? in wisdom.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, what role did Simeon play in Joseph's saga? We're not specifically told in the earlier chapters. Why was Simeon specifically chosen? Because Joseph singled him out to put him in prison as collateral for Benjamin. Why Simeon? I don't know. And Simeon was in prison for quite a while because Judah just tells us that his dad delayed.
I wonder if Simeon was the one who instigated the throwing him in the pit and selling him.
Mhm. I was thinking.
Or perhaps even the one who wanted to kill him. I'm not sure. He must have done something very evil.
Yeah, perhaps that. Mhm. Stop talking, Jack.
Anything else before we move on to 44?
I just went back to have a look in the first chapter we read, and it does not say specifically who it was that decided to sell him to the Egyptians. It was just mentioned that Reuben was the one who saved his life, and by saying, let's not kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. There must have been something with Simeon, though, because Joseph singled him out. Okay. Chapter 44. Who wants that?
I'll read it for you, Jules.
Thank you.
44. Okay. Then he commanded his house steward, saying, fill the men's sack with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of the sack. Now put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph had told him. As the morning light broke, the men were sent away, they with their donkeys. Now they had just gone out of the city and were not far off when Joseph said to his house steward, arise, pursue the men. You shall overtake them and say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and which he indeed used to interpret omens? You have done evil in doing this. So he overtook them and spoke these words to them. And they said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks we have brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? With whomever of your servants it is found, let him die, and we also will be my Lord's slaves. So he said, now let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, but the rest of you shall be innocent. Then they hurried, each man brought his sack to the ground, down to the ground, and each man opened his sack. So he searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. Then Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there. So they fell to the ground before him. And Joseph said to them, what is this deed that you have done? Do you not know that such a man as I can indeed interpret omens? So Judah said, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found. But he said, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the cup has been found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. Then Judah came near to him and said, O my Lord, may your servant please speak a word in my Lord's ears, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to Pharaoh.
My Lord asked his servants, saying, Have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, We have an old father and a little child of his old age. Now his brother is dead, so he alone is left of his mother, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, Bring him down to me that I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, The boy cannot leave his father. If he should leave his father would die. You said to your servants, however, If your youngest brother does not come down with you, you will not see my face again. Thus it happened that when we went up to your servant, my father, we were told the words of my Lord. We told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, Go back, buy us a little food. But we said, We cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down. For we cannot see the man's face if our youngest brother is not with us. And your servant, my father, said to us, You know that my wife bore me 2 sons, and the one went out from me. And I said, Surely he is torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm befalls him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in evil. So now, when I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, and his life is bound up in the boy's life, so it will be that when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. For your servant became a guarantee for the boy to my father, saying, If I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the sin before my father all my days. So now please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a slave to my Lord, and let the boy go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the boy is not with me, lest I see the evil that will overtake my father? I find it going back to the first chapter we read, I think it was 37. And they knew that Joseph had favor with his father. He gave them the coat, and, Joseph was bragging a little bit. And because of their jealousy, they threw Joseph in the pit and then ultimately sold him. And now they're like pleading with Joseph to not do this to their father. By taking Benjamin, they would cause their father to die. Yet they didn't have that same thought when they did that with Joseph, even though they knew that Joseph was his father's favorite.
That's an excellent point. And my question is, do you believe the Spirit of Yah in Joseph is forcing this issue with them?
Yes.
I do too. They're being forced to play this out again because they made such an evil choice the first time. And it's interesting because here is soul tie passage that I was talking about. Verse 30, now therefore, when I came to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Okay. There's an unusually strong soul tie there.
Go back to Cortron 7. Oh, Cortron 7, the lovely red sun rises. Don't forget the fun of going out on the tower to get the yes.
It's interesting to me how they have gotten to this point. They've eaten in his house, they've hugged each other, they've come within close proximity to each other, and they still don't know who he is.
Have they hugged each other at this point? I didn't think they'd hugged each other. They still see him as the as the ruler that can wreck their lives.
Okay, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. I thought when he saw Benjamin and they were eating that he hugged him and then he had to leave the room when he went to cry.
Oh,
Maybe I read that wrong.
he may have hugged Benjamin, or he may have made strides to Benjamin. I was just thinking the other brothers. I didn't think he. Well, I wonder how old Benjamin was at that point. He must have been a teenager, maybe, because Joseph was 30 something.
So we know for sure that Joseph was elevated out of prison into the palace. Okay, from the pit to the palace at age 30. Then we know for sure there were 7 years of plenty. Okay, then we know for sure the famine was well underway. So by this point, Joseph is probably, in all likelihood, probably 40, 41, maybe 42. So Benjamin would have had to have already been born by the time Joseph was imprisoned. We know Joseph was imprisoned or in Egypt for several years. Many speculate that Joseph was probably 14, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there when he was sold into slavery. Okay. So spent somewhere in the neighborhood of half his life in Egypt by the time he was released from prison. So I'm guessing, we don't know exactly how many years were between Benjamin and Joseph, but there could not have been more than probably 15. So if Joseph, by this point, after this many years of famine, is probably 40, 41, 42, then Benjamin is probably in his mid to late 20s.
So, okay, I have a preconceived idea in my mind.
Okay.
That Benjamin and Joseph were actually closer in age than that, and then Benjamin was born before Joseph was sold to Egypt, but I could be entirely wrong on that front.
Well, I think I think it's a guarantee that Benjamin was born before Joseph was sold because Joseph knew about him.
Yeah.
But they may have been very close. They may have been really, really close brothers, good friends.
Yeah. That was the preconceived idea that I had. And that was why it was so important to him for them to bring him down to Egypt to see him.
Any other thoughts on this?
I think the thing that is relevant, and I can't remember if I already mentioned this before or not, my brain. Anyway, is that the point you mentioned before, Jules, about the spirit in Joseph forcing this issue is and at least they're making better decisions now. They're making better choices and they're making more thoughtful and caring and righteous choices about how they go about taking care of the family and protecting each other instead of just, let's get rid of this one because we don't like him.
Well, and the reality is they're about to, in the next chapter, they're about to come face to face with their brother whom we've already read they've now bowed to. Okay? So his dreams have come to pass now.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's been probably close to, I would say 25 to 30 years since they did what they did. 25 to 30 years have passed. And he's been away from them the bulk of his life. He's now a prophet, seated in glory, ruling as viceroy of Egypt, with all the power and authority of Egypt at his fingertips. It's astonishing how this has come full circle, or is in the process of coming full circle.
And it's like the boys are given a chance to do it right this time
Mhm.
around.
That's right.
Like us.
Yeah.
I bet he was kind of drawing them out, because it's obvious that he has such feelings and probably wants to reconcile, but I think he has to know if his brothers, where their heart is in what happened. And you know, that does come out, that his brothers have regrets, So I'm thinking he plays it out to see, presses them and tests them, and to see where their heart is toward him.
I agree. I agree.
Well, and it's true, because look at the kids are worried about Jacob passing from the pain and suffering of it too.
You have to wonder, did they not realize how deeply hurt, devastated Jacob would be when they did what they did with Joseph? So they ensured that they would never do it with Benjamin?
Well, the one brother said he would kill his two sons if he didn't come back with them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hindsight is always 20/20, right? So by the time, at the time that they're doing what they're doing with Joseph and they sell him off to Egypt, like they're just feeling their own selfish, sorry little feels for themselves because, this one's the favorite and he gets all the attention and blah, 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 whatever, and we don't like him. Let's get rid of him. And then they go home and make up the lie that they found the coat and it's covered in blood, and then the father's heartbreak. And then they see what devastation that has caused to their father, and they still haven't told their father the truth. They're going along with the story that they've created. And then they know in their hearts what actually happened. Then the opportunity comes along where they have to make the same choice again. Do they make the same choice, or do they do something different given the heartache of their father and the shame that they've had to carry through their lives, knowing the truth versus what their father believes?
Yeah, and the stakes are so much higher this time, but they're not aware of it because they don't know who Joseph is.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, he's about to reveal himself. Anybody want chapter 45?
I can take it.
Thank you.
Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him. So dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come closer to me. And they came closer. He said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For Yah sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. Yah sent me before you to preserve you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but Yah. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, Yah has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brothers, Benjamin's neck, and he wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all of his brothers and wept upon them. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to read that. How forgiving he is. So easily.
Yeah. Yeah. I can carry on if you want, dear.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Verse 15. And after that, his brothers talked with him. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this. Load your animals and go back to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me so that I may give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you may enjoy the fat of the land. You are further charged to say, do this. Take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Give no thought to your possessions, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons according to the instructions of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. To each one of them he gave a set of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 sets of garments. To his father he sent the following: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provision for his father on the journey. Then he sent his brothers on their way, and as they were leaving, he said to them, do not quarrel along the way. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is still alive. He is even ruler over all the land of Egypt. He was stunned. He could not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph that he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Israel said, enough! My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die.
Pretty sure it says right there that Jacob died, didn't he? And then his spirit revived him.
Mm-hmm. I think he was a walking dead man from the dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'm staggered by Joseph's generosity just generosity to his brothers. I'm just blown away by it.
That's what got me. It's like, I'm from a big family, as you know,
Mhm.
and to see that, you know, when you're in turmoil with your family, how we always so forgiving like that.
Mhm.
Or not only your family, but friends and relatives. That's just mind blowing to me.
Well, and they took his coat away, and in exchange, he gave them sets of garments. They received silver for selling him, and he paid them silver. Just generously.
But isn't that Yahweh? When we come to that place with him, he's so loving and compassionate and generous with us.
And again, it's just such a beautiful picture of Yeshua.
Yeah.
They're so overwhelmed. They can't even talk. They're so dismayed at his presence. They're so stunned. And he's inviting them, come closer to me.
Yeah.
Come closer to me. Draw near to me and I will draw near to you. That sort of thing. Okay. And this is, of course, this is Yeshua, the prophetic parallel here.
Yeah.
Come closer to me. And then he begins to explain who he is. I'm actually your flesh and blood brother. Okay. I'm not a Gentile. I'm not a goy after all.
In
So
addition
don't be
to that,
distressed. Don't be angry. All of this was the plan of God himself. And now I'm going to provide for you and all of your families in the famine.
but in addition to that, not only is he going to provide for them, he's going to give them the best of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Yah wants to do for us, you know. If we give our lives to him and we follow his commandments and we remain committed to the covenant that he has made with us, he wants to give us the best of everything. He wants to give us the best of the land.
Yes. Yeah. Because he's the firstborn of many brothers. Isn't that what we're told? Yeshua?
Yeah.
The firstborn of many brothers. Even though Joseph is not the biological firstborn. But he had the birthright upon him. As we will see in 49. He's the firstborn spiritually. And so he entered in to Egypt to rule and reign as the firstborn of all creation, but many siblings are going to follow him. And that comes with the best of the land. So we now have an age on Joseph. So he must have been right around 39, maybe 40 at the oldest, if he left prison at 30, because they're now in the second year of the famine. Or rather, maybe it's the third year of the famine, early third year, if there are 5 years left. Okay. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. That's verse 13. I mean, this is again prophetic of Yeshua. You must tell your nation, the one from whom you come, okay, your brethren and all your family, how greatly I am honored in the world system. because Egypt is the type of the world. Any other thoughts here? It is interesting to me that whereas Jacob could not be convinced to go up or send his son up to Egypt to get Simeon out of prison, as soon as he finds out Joseph is alive, he says, enough. I must go up and see him before I die. Let's get. Come on, y'all. What are you waiting on? Let's go.
I find it pretty wild too how Pharaoh was pleased and gives them all those things, right? Do this, load your animals, go back to the land of Canaan, take your father and your household to come to me. I may give you the best of the land in Egypt. And that's pretty interesting, right?
And they had all that favor only because of their connection to Joseph.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you know, if Egypt is the world system and Joseph is a type of Messiah, that favor, it only comes through him.
That's right.
Genesis 46. When Israel set out on his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Then he said, I am Elohim, the Elohe of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will bring you up again, and Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their little ones and their wives, in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and the goods that they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and they came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, all his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. Now these are the names of the Israelites, Jacob and his offspring who came to Egypt. Okay, y'all, just for the purposes of time and staying on topic today, I think we're going to skip this genealogy. Okay, let me skip down here. I'm going to skip down to verse 26. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own offspring, not including the wives of his sons, were 66 persons in all. The children of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Israel sent Judah ahead to Joseph to lead the way before him into Goshen. When they came to the land of Goshen, Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet his father Israel in Goshen. He presented himself to him, fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, I can die now, having seen for myself that you are still alive. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our ancestors, in order that you may settle in the land of Goshen, because all shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians. What are your thoughts?
Well, interesting how that last sentence ended. All shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians. I never even caught that till you just read that. So is that like saying people of Yeshua are abhorrent to the world in some aspects?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I wonder how Jacob felt leaving and coming into this land, which you probably know, and I can't remember. I know he dies, taken back, but I think he was just so happy.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's just fascinating to me. Okay, we've already determined that probably at least 25 years have passed. Maybe a few more. And Jacob didn't know the entire time that his son was alive. And now Yah speaks to him and says, not only is he alive, but I myself will go down with you. I will bring you up again, and Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes when you die. Yah himself is now telling Jacob, your son is alive. What happened in the interim 25 plus years that Jacob pined away as a walking dead man and did not hear from Yah that his son is alive? That has quite a question mark over it for me.
Is it possible that he lacked or stopped giving praise because he fell into big fat feels and he was not communing with Yah because maybe he was blaming Yah the fact that his son was taken from him, and instead of like seeking Yah and communicating with Yah directly about the situation, he just kind of went with the narrative and fell into the sooks and the big poor me's and just blamed Yah.
I think that's very likely.
Well, his spirit was revived, so it definitely was something going on there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The chapter starts out calling him Israel, okay, which is the new name he was given previously as he was set to enter the promised land. But then when Yah speaks to him, he says, Jacob, Jacob.
I've been noticing the name changes in the last like 5 verses.
Yeah, I wonder why Yah would do that. I wonder why Yah would call him Jacob instead of Israel. I wonder if that's actually what happened or if it is a translation issue.
It's not a translation issue. It's actually in the Septuagint too.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me pull that up here. I've actually done a study on the Jacob versus Israel thing and the timing of it and why Jacob was renamed Israel but not consistently called Israel from that point on. Because to my knowledge, as far as I'm aware, when Avram was renamed Avraham, from that point forward, he was always called by his new name. Same thing with Sarai being renamed Sarah.
Yeah.
But not so with Jacob. Throughout the text, we see it switch back and forth between Jacob and Israel, Jacob and Israel.
Yep.
And There's a very key factor in receiving a new name to enter the promised land. But switching back into an old identity will keep us out of the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Israel versus Jacob distinction is also in the Septuagint. It's exactly the same.
So maybe it is that then he called him Jacob because he had fallen back into the big fat fields and the poor me's, and he had lacked giving praise, and he didn't take it to Yah, and he did blame Yah for what had transpired.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very likely that Yah is essentially calling him by his old name to say, you've not yet arrived, but I'm still going to fulfill my promise to you. Because I told you the last time I revealed myself to you as El Shaddai that I'm going to do this. I'm still going to do this, only it's not going to happen the way you thought. And it's not going to happen in the land you thought it was going to happen in.
Yeah. A little bit of a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, I think what we're watching here in the last several verses of the last chapter and then the first verses of this chapter is I think we're watching a resurrection of Jacob.
I was going to say that earlier when it said Jacob revived. I was going to ask you if that was like a resurrection.
I think so. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that for a very long time he was a dead man walking.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is interesting. Looking back over this in the Septuagint, 𝗎𝗪𝗩𝗏, I didn't catch this, in Hebrew means well of the oath. So Jacob rose up from the well of the oath, and the sons of Israel took up their father and the baggage and their wives. And then they went on their way. Okay.
Is that also the place where Yah changed his name?
So back in, let's see, Genesis, I think it was 37. Let me find it. No, it wasn't 37. I think it was 32. Just a minute. Let me go back here. Nope, it was Genesis 35:11. I need to quit guessing. That was at Padan Aram, not 𝗎𝗪𝗩𝗏.
Okay.
And I don't know, without a map in front of me, I don't know their proximity or anything.
No, I was just looking at it thinking from the perspective of if that means the well of the oath, that's quite a significant oath that he promised him when he changed his name. But if it was a different place, then my thought process is slightly off track.
I think there were several very significant things that happened at 𝗎𝗪𝗩𝗏, though, the well of the oath. Yeah. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree there, called there on the name of Yah, the everlasting God. Abraham lived at 𝗎𝗪𝗩𝗏. So many connections in scripture. I mean, we would just have to spend hours nailing all these connections down. They all matter. They're all significant. What chapter are we in? Are we in 46?
I think you just, yeah, because it ended with for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.
That's right. Okay. Anything else before we move on to 47? No. Okay. Who wants 47?
I can read it for you. Then Joseph went and spoke to Pharaoh and said, My father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds, and all they possess, have come from the land of Canaan. And see, they are in the land of Goshen. Oh, excuse me. And he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to his brothers, What is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, Your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, We have come to dwell in the land, because there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the scarcity of food is severe in the land of Canaan. And now, please let your servants sojourn in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know of capable men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. And Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, How old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, The days of the years of my sojournings are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not reached the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojournings. Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt and the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father and his brothers and all his father's household with bread for the mouth of the little ones. Now there was no bread in all the land, because the scarcity of food was very severe. And the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan became exhausted from the scarcity of food. And Joseph gathered up all the silver that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they had bought. And Joseph brought the silver into Pharaoh's house. When the silver was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the silver is gone. And Joseph said, Give your livestock, and I give you bread for your livestock, if the silver is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread to exchange for the horses and for the flocks they owned, and for the herds they owned, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, We do not hide from my master that our silver is all spent, and my master also has the livestock we owned. There has not been left any before my master, but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread. Let us and our land be servants of Pharaoh, and give us seed, and let us live and not die, and let the land not lie waste. And Joseph bought the entire land of Egypt for Pharaoh, because every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the scarcity of food was severe upon them, and the land came to be Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other. Only the ground of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had from what Pharaoh gave them by law, and they ate that which Pharaoh gave them by law. Therefore they did not sell their ground. And Joseph said to the people, Look, I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall be that in the harvest you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 is your own, as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones. And they said, You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the eyes of my master, and we shall become Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the ground of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and were fruitful, and increased exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. And the time for Israel to die drew near, and he called his son Joseph and said to him, Now, if I have found favor in your eyes, please put your hand under my thigh and show loving commitment and truth to me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but I shall lie with my fathers, and you shall take me up out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I do as you have said. And he said, Swear to me. And he swore to him, and Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. It's interesting how the Egyptians, the shepherds were an abomination unto the Egyptians, according to the previous chapter. And then Jacob's family moves to Egypt, and they are shepherds. And then all the Egyptians run out of money buying food. So then Joseph says to them, Well, give me your animals. So then he increases the livestock and the need for shepherds for Pharaoh's household. And then he ends up getting the land and the servants for Pharaoh's household. And then I think he makes it a command. If I've got this right, I think Joseph makes it a command in Egypt that they are to tithe 1/5 of their possessions to Pharaoh, which is along the lines of what is that not what they did when the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, like after they leave Egypt? Like they're to give a certain amount of their possessions for the priests?
Oh, it's not 1/5. I don't know all the specs right off the top of my head, but that's why they have to bring sacrifices, because the sacrifices actually feed the priests.
Right.
I think usually the grain offering would be like 1/10.
Okay.
And then the specific animal offerings would depend on the infraction.
Right.
But the priests in the wilderness, and then certainly at the tabernacle, they were supposed to get the best of the best. They were supposed to be fed with the finest.
Yeah.
Because there would be no lame or maimed animals. The animals all had to be in perfect condition.
Right.
They were to be the finest yields of the harvest, essentially.
But so I agree with what you're saying. And so that sort of shadow picture that if I'm seeing it correctly here, Joseph is kind of implementing that for his family in that, he asked Pharaoh to give them the best of the land. And now, he's getting all the livestock for Pharaoh, and his family are shepherds. And so Pharaoh asked, if you know any able men, take care of my flocks.
I'm seeing socialism. I'm seeing a world government system.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, I've been mulling on this one for years. I'm not sure how all the parallels fit, because Joseph was doing this for Pharaoh, having been appointed by Yah himself to this position to save many lives.
Right.
And so it's not like it's an evil beast government doing this.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do the rest of you think?
I'm pondering.
Okay.
I missed the question. What was it?
Well, we were talking about Joseph collecting the land and the livestock on behalf of Pharaoh. And Shireen was saying that she thinks it's like the priests of Israel getting the best, kind of like a tithe to them in the wilderness or at the tabernacle. And I was saying, I actually see socialism, and I see parallels with a world government system that takes over the production. But yet Joseph is also righteous. He's God-fearing, and he's not an evil beast government doing this. So I'm not sure how all the prophetic parallels work here.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's interesting though that you said you see socialism, because I've not looked at it that way. So that's certainly interesting. I guess I just didn't think about it until Shireen brought it up, you know. That's why I said I'm pondering, because prophetically, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm stumped, I'll admit.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just scrolling through chapter 48 here to see what we need to cover before we go to 49. Okay, so 48, Jacob blesses. Jacob is ill. So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Jacob summons his strength and he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. And Manasseh's older, but he gives Ephraim, the younger son, the birthright. And I'm just going to read the last several verses here. Starting in verse 17. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will invoke blessings, saying, God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh." So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your ancestors. I now give to you one portion more than to your brothers, the portion that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow." Then chapter 49. We don't need to read the whole thing, but I do want to read the blessing over Joseph. Starting in verse 1, then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather round, that I may tell you what will happen to you in days to come." Now, this is interesting because in the Hebrew, what it actually says is, in the days ending, okay, in Yomim Acharit, okay, in the last days. Acharit is like the future or a conclusion, the end, the latter end. So Jacob knows that he's prophesying the last days. "Assemble and hear, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father." Okay, we're going to skip Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Asher, Naphtali. Okay, now down in verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers fiercely attacked him. They shot at him and pressed him hard. Yet his bow remained taut, and his arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are stronger than the blessings of the eternal mountains. The bounties of the everlasting hills, may they be on the head of Joseph, on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. Now that's verse 26. I'm going to read a little bit of that in the Septuagint. Just a second. Yeah. So the Septuagint, Brenton's translation, actually says, verse 2, assemble yourselves that I may tell you what shall happen to you in the last days. Okay. Skipping down to verse 26. Actually, no, I'm going to skip down to verse 22 because in the Septuagint, the numbering system is different. Joseph is a son increased. My dearly loved son is increased. My youngest son turned to me, against whom men taking evil counsel reproached him, and the archers pressed hard upon him. But their bow and arrows were mightily consumed, and the sinews of their arms were slackened by the hand of the mighty one of Jacob. Thence is he that strengthened Israel from the God of thy father. And my God helped thee, and he blessed thee with the blessing of heaven from above, and the blessing of the earth, possessing all things, because of the blessing of the breast and of the womb, the blessings of thy father and thy mother. It has prevailed above the blessing of the lasting mountains, and beyond the blessings of the everlasting hills. They shall be upon the head of Joseph, and upon the head of the brothers, of whom he took the lead. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think it says that, to me, it says that Joseph has always had Yah walking with him because, though the archers have bitterly grieved him and shot at him and hated him, his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And Joseph received the double portion. And then, of course, his youngest received his double portion.
Yeah, that's true too. I thought of that before, and I was going to say that, and then I forgot. But it's interesting how Joseph was not the firstborn, and yet he was favored, and then he's got a problem with his father blessing his not firstborn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could spend an entire study just breaking apart the blessing of Jacob in Genesis 49. Because he actually foretells who the Antichrist will come from, the tribe of Dan and all that. It's quite fascinating. But nothing but blessings and fruitfulness on Joseph. And fruitfulness on his youngest son, who of course became the namesake of the northern kingdom during the divided kingdom days, when the kingdoms were split under King Rehoboam, and then Jeroboam took over the northern kingdom that became known as Ephraim, was scattered into the nations, and yet we're told the progeny of Joseph will be fruitful. a fruitful bough by a spring, to the point that his branches literally spread out over the wall. It's a beautiful promise.
So that therefore kind of is telling you that Yah will have a people.
Mm-hmm.
Because Joseph was Yah's servant, blessed by Yah, and prospered in the point that he was doing Yah's work. So if the progeny of Joseph is going to be a double portion, and they're fruit bearing, and they're by a fountain. I mean, maybe this is me reading too much into it, but it kind of sounds a little bit like the water of life, and that the servants who obey Yah are going to be fruitful, a double portion.
It reminds me of Psalm 1. They will be like a tree, well watered by rivers,
Yeah.
whose leaf does not fail, even in drought. Yield their fruit in its season. In all that they do, they prosper. Yeah. I mean, really, that describes Joseph. In all that they do, they prosper.
Yep.
So there was just one last passage in Genesis 50 that I wanted to make sure we hit today. Okay. Let me go back to that. Because we already read it in a previous chapter. I think it was 47 maybe. But Joseph clearly tells us let's see, let me back up here. Okay, so after Jacob dies, and he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Realizing that their father was dead, I'm in verse 15. Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him?" So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him, and said, "We are here as your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do me harm, Elohim intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So he tells us there in chapter 50. He told us previously in chapter 45. Yah sent me here to preserve lives. It was not you who did it. He sent me. He intended this thing that you intended for evil. He intended it for good. I hear a lot of people talk about how God will turn it to good, but that's not what it says. El Shaddai intended it for good because he is preeminent and his word, once declared, cannot be nullified. He is not Satan's poop or scoop or walking along behind him, cleaning up his messes, turning them to good. That's not the nature of our living creator, whose word declares all things into existence. He is preeminent. What he intends stands. And I just think of how differently this could have turned out had Joseph been a resentful, bitter, unforgiving, hard-hearted man after everything, every evil thing he was put through. How differently this story could have gone. But the deliverance of the known world really truly hinged on his shoulders.
It's hard to imagine what actually would have transpired and how it would have come about had he not been as forgiving and merciful and obeying Yah's commands, doing what Yah's will is.
Right. Right.
It's interesting actually, because I mentioned earlier about how Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, how all the fathers of Israel, they were not like perfect men, right? Like they had their weaknesses and uh their flesh issues where they're trying to control the situation and all that sort of stuff. But there's not too much in the story of Joseph that depicts that he had struggled with the situation. It was like there's nothing really that tells you that he had a hard time making decisions to go along with Yah's will, or that he had a struggle to say, oh, do I obey Yah or do I choose my own flesh or whatever. Like it's very much like the story of Yeshua, where he did walk the perfect life.
Absolutely. Yeah, the path of integrity, the path of excellence,
Yeah.
prospering in all he did because of it. Well, it's a fascinating study. And I just love that from where he started being directed by that certain man in the field to his brothers, to where he declared that it was Yah himself who sent him there. It's such a path,
Yeah.
such an arc.
It's definitely an incredible story.
Yeah, this was perfect, honestly, for, you said in the beginning you're not quite sure why you had to do this, but I think Genesis 50 and 19 just told you, if you kind of make it applicable to, what we're going through. And I think specifically what you're going through, Jules, it's intended for your good. You kind of said it in the beginning that we go through these small things. I think you were saying it about yourself, basically. You're going through these small things because of the larger thing, and it's prepping you. But yet here, through all that Joseph has gone through, and in the many times in which he was tempted or forgotten, and then you brought out Psalm 105 that I hadn't even thought of, truly letting us know the struggle, the suffering that Joseph did go through. And all of that, his brothers betraying him, the people that's supposed to be the closest to him, betraying him. And then in Genesis 50:19, it was intended for his good.
Yeah. And I'm not totally certain. Did Joseph have the birthright before all this happened or after all this happened? I'm not totally clear on that, but I'm looking at Ezekiel 47, verse 13. Ezekiel is touring the prophesied temple, and Yah says, these are the boundaries by which you shall divide the land for inheritance among the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph shall have 2 portions. Okay, so this is the land. There's another passage that talks about the temple and the gate for Joseph. And I got those two confused here. But Joseph gets 2 portions of land.
Mm. You said that
And
was Ezekiel 47:13?
That was Ezekiel 47:13. And then 1 Chronicles 5 reiterates that though Judah became prominent among his brothers and a ruler came from him, yet the birthright belonged to Joseph.
Mm. And that was 1 Chronicles 5 and what?
5 verses 1 and 2.
Thanks.
Mhm.
I think that as much as the birthright is important, I think it has really no significance whatsoever on whether or not anybody's going to obey Yah.
Well, in this case, the significance is that he received the birthright because of what Reuben had done. Reuben was the firstborn.
Right, right. Mhm.
Right.
And what Reuben did with his sister, I think it was Dinah, Dina,
Mhm.
because he was a violent and hasty man. Joseph, or rather Jacob, would not impart the birthright to him.
Right.
So,
But that doesn't change the fact that Joseph was going to do God's will whether or not he had the birthright.
it's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
My thought is that his obedience and his faithfulness to Yah go hand in hand with his spiritual birthright,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
double portion in the spirit.
Yep. I see that.
Well, what do y'all think of this format compared to the usual one?
I
I
like
thought it was awesome.
I love it. Yeah, this was an amazing study today. Yep. This format is good.
Okay. Oh, you may
I
do
like
more.
it.
We so rarely sit down and just like study chapter upon chapter. We kind of hop around. All right, ladies. Well, it's been a blessing. I have a cat who's telling me it's time to come feed her belly. I don't know if you can hear her or not. I don't know if my mic is picking it up. She's literally right there at the mic. But let me speak the blessing over y'all. Yah bless you and keep you. Yah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.
Amen.
And have an amazing evening or
You
morning.
all too. Love you, ladies. Go in peace,
Love you
y'all.